Elias had been the keeper of the lighthouse for as long as anyone could remember, though no one in the village really kept track of the years. They only knew that when the mists rolled in from the sea, the light at the top of the cliff would always shine, unwavering, cutting through the gray haze like a golden thread. The lighthouse itself was a tall, weathered sentinel, its white paint faded to the pale gray of driftwood. Moss clung to its base, and gulls nested in its crannies, chattering in the wind as though gossiping about the world below. From inside, the spiral staircase creaked softly under Elias's careful steps. Every night he would ascend it, lantern in hand, to light the great glass lens that guided ships safely past the rocky coast. Elias's lantern was no ordinary lantern. Its brass surface gleamed even in the dim light of dusk, and the flame inside seemed to hold more than fire. It held memories. He believed it whispered to him sometimes, a soft hum of the past and the sea, a comforting murmur when loneliness crept in like the fog. Outside, the sea breathed steadily, waves sighing against the cliff rocks, curling into themselves in quiet rhythm. The wind carried the scent of salt and seaweed, tinged with something undefinable, old stories perhaps, or echoes of lost sailors. Elias liked to imagine the sea spoke in soft, secret voices, telling him tales no one else would ever hear. He had no family to speak of, save for the occasional visiting villagers who always marveled at his dedication. But Elias never felt lonely. There was a kind of solace in solitude, he thought, a slow, breathing peace that came from watching the light flicker and the waves stretch endlessly into the horizon. One evening, as the sun dipped behind clouds heavy with approaching night, Elias prepared his lantern with particular care. The glass was polished until it shone like a jewel, and the wick was trimmed perfectly. Lighting it, he watched the flame dance, casting golden reflections across the walls of the tower. Outside, the first stars appeared, shy and twinkling, peeking through the mist as if drawn to the light. And in that quiet hour, Elias heard it, a faint, melodic hum, neither wind nor wave. He smiled softly, recognizing it as the song of the lantern, the gentle murmur of memories and hope entwined. He closed his eyes for a moment, letting it fill him, letting it remind him that even in the loneliest corners, light could shine steadfastly, guiding the lost, comforting the weary, and keeping the night at bay. The night stretched on, long and quiet, with only the whisper of waves for company. Elias lingered near the window of the lantern room, his hands resting on the cool brass railing. Below, the sea glimmered faintly, catching the light of the stars, each wave a tiny mirror reflecting the vast, endless sky. He breathed in the familiar scent of salt and stone, feeling the gentle pulse of the world around him. Sometimes, when the fog rolled in thick, Elias would swear the lighthouse itself was alive. He imagined it leaning slightly toward the ocean, listening to the soft stories that drifted on the wind. He thought of the ships that had passed by, guided by this solitary beam, and the lives that had depended on its unwavering presence. There was a quiet pride in that, a soft warmth that filled the empty spaces of the tower. Tonight, the wind carried a different note, a gentle, almost playful ripple among the waves, as if the sea itself had a secret it wanted to share. Elias smiled. It reminded him of a memory from long ago, when he had been a young keeper, newly arrived at this cliff, eager but nervous. On his first night, the lantern had refused to light. He had twisted, polished, and coaxed it, until finally, with a soft sigh, the flame bloomed. That first glow had felt like a promise, a small victory against the dark unknown. He often thought about that night when the loneliness pressed close. The flame of the lantern, steady and unwavering, had been his first friend here. And in the years since, it had grown into something more than light. It carried all his stories, his hopes, and the quiet love he had learned to feel for this rugged cliff, this restless sea, and the invisible lives it touched. As he watched the horizon, a small flicker of movement caught his eye. A lantern, perhaps, far across the water, bobbing gently in the distance. He could not tell if it belonged to a passing boat or a distant keeper, but it made him feel less alone. Even in this vast expanse, there was a sense of connection, a reminder that light, however small, reached across the emptiness. Elias hummed softly, a tune he had learned in childhood, one that seemed to belong to the waves themselves. The lantern flickered in rhythm with his song, and for a while he felt the weight of solitude ease. There was magic here, he thought, not the kind found in spells or fairy tales, but the kind that lived quietly, in the heart, in the turning of a page, the swing of a lantern, the steady breathing of the world at night. And then, as the mist thickened and the stars hid behind clouds, Elias climbed the spiral staircase once more, lantern in hand, to check the mechanisms that kept the great light spinning. Every step creaked beneath him, each sound a reminder that he was part of this place, part of its rhythm, its soft, eternal vigil. By the time he reached the top again, the night had deepened. The lighthouse gleam cut a golden path across the water, and Elias stood for a long moment, letting the quiet wash over him. Somewhere out there, someone would see it, guided safely by the steadfast glow. And in that thought, he found rest.
The night deepened into a velvet hush, and the sea's soft murmur became almost hypnotic. Elias sat by the lantern, leaning back against the curved wall of the tower. Outside, the mist curled like silver ribbons around the cliffs, wrapping the world in gentle secrecy. He watched the light spill across the waves, imagining it as a thread connecting him to unseen travelers, guiding them safely through the darkness. Sleepy thoughts began to drift in, like little boats floating on a slow tide. He remembered his youth, the first winters at the lighthouse, when snow had drifted against the windows and the wind had rattled the panes like a restless spirit. He had spent nights scribbling notes in a small leather journal, recording the rhythms of the sea and the tiny wonders he noticed, glimmering shells on the shore, the slow dance of phosphorescent plankton in the waves, the way the fog swallowed sound and softened the edges of the world. It was then that he first noticed the subtle magic that seemed to dwell in the lighthouse. At the edge of sleep, he would see shapes in the mist, vague and flickering, like shadows from creatures from another time. Sometimes a flicker of light would appear far below the cliff, moving with a purposeful grace, though no boat should have been there. And always the lantern hummed, a quiet vibration that resonated in his chest, a gentle reminder that the world was larger than he could see, filled with wonders that only those who listened carefully could feel. Tonight, the magic felt closer than ever. As Elias closed his eyes, a faint glow seemed to drift from the lantern, spilling beyond the glass in soft golden tendrils. In that glow, he saw fleeting visions, a family of seabirds gliding above the waves, a distant ship's crew waving from their deck, a small child on the shore looking up at the lighthouse in awe. Each vision lasted only a heartbeat, but the warmth it left behind lingered, settling in the corners of his heart like sunlight on calm water. Elias let out a quiet sigh, allowing himself to sink into the comfort of these fleeting wonders. The wind whispered around the tower, threading the sound of the sea through the spiraling walls, and he felt a deep, abiding peace. The lantern's flame flickered once, twice, and then steadied, a tiny heartbeat echoing his own. He leaned forward and whispered, almost without thinking, "Thank you for keeping me company." The words felt ridiculous at first, and yet the lantern seemed to respond. Its light glowed a little brighter, casting shimmering patterns across the floor, as if it understood and wished to answer. Elias smiled, closing his eyes again, letting the hum of the lantern and the song of the sea lull him toward sleep. As he drifted, the world outside softened further. The cliffs became gentle slopes of stone, the waves slowed into a quiet, endless pulse, and the mist curled into shapes of long-forgotten memories dancing just beyond reach. It was as if the lighthouse itself were breathing, rocking him in its steady rhythm, whispering that all was well, that the world was safe, and that the light would always shine, even in the darkest hours.
Morning came slowly, as though the world were still wrapped in the last folds of the night's dream. The mist lingered along the cliffs, softening the jagged edges of rock and sea alike. Elias awoke on the wooden bench near the lantern, the brass light now dim but still warm, a reminder of the night's quiet magic. He stretched, his joints creaking in the familiar way, and gazed out across the water where the first pale fingers of sunlight brushed the waves. The village below was stirring, though softly. Smoke drifted from chimneys, gulls circled lazily above the harbor, and the smell of salt and seaweed mingled with the faint scent of bread baking. But for Elias, the lighthouse and the cliffside remained a world apart, a sanctuary where time slowed, where light and sea held sway, and where he could carry the secrets of the night in the lantern's golden glow. He walked to the edge of the cliff, lantern in hand, peering down at the waves curling gently over hidden rocks. And there, just beyond the mist, he saw it, a small boat, rocking quietly, guided by some unseen hand toward the safety of the harbor. A smile spread across his face, warm and slow. The lantern's light had done its work, reaching across the morning haze, connecting him to the lives of strangers he would never meet, and to the tide that had always been his companion. As the boat drew closer, Elias thought of all the years he had spent tending this lighthouse, night after night. The solitude had once felt heavy, a shadow pressing in from all sides, but now he understood. It was in that very quiet that the magic had grown. Every wave, every gust of wind, every flicker of flame had been a conversation with the world. The lantern had listened to him, he had listened to it, and together they had shaped a small, enduring light in the darkness. Returning to the tower, he tended the lantern once more, polishing its brass until it gleamed in the soft daylight. He watched the shadows dance across the spiral staircase, remembering the faces and voices that had passed through his life like gentle tides. Friends, travelers, even the occasional curious child from the village who had climbed the cliff just to see the light. And in each memory, the lantern hummed softly, as if recognizing them too, weaving them all together into the quiet tapestry of his days. By midday, the mist had lifted, and the sea stretched into a calm, endless blue. The lighthouse stood proudly on the cliff, a sentinel of memory, magic, and quiet hope. Elias sat on the bench once more, lantern by his side, letting the sun warm his face. He understood, finally, that his life had always been a kind of light, small, steadfast, and patient, reaching out into the world even when it seemed no one was watching. And as the day unfolded with gentle rhythm, the slow sway of the tides, the distant call of gulls, the occasional laugh from the village below, Elias felt a deep, enduring peace. The lighthouse and its lantern were not just tools of guidance, they were reminders that even in solitude, even in the mist and dark, there is warmth and there is connection. That night, when the flame of the lantern once again leapt to life, Elias hummed his familiar tune,
letting it rise into the cliffside wind. The light cut through the darkness, steady and true, a golden thread across the waves. Somewhere, far beyond his sight, lives were quietly guided, hearts eased, and dreams gently protected by a humble lighthouse keeper and the soft magic of his lantern. And in that glow, the world was right, and sleep came easily, carrying with it the promise of another night filled with quiet wonder, whispered memories, and the enduring, gentle light of hope.
The following evening brought a peculiar hush over the cliffs. The wind was softer, carrying the scent of the distant tide, but no sharp salt bite, as though the world itself had paused in quiet anticipation. Elias climbed the spiral staircase slowly, lantern in hand, feeling the familiar creak of each step beneath his boots. Even after so many years, the act of ascending never failed to soothe him, the repetition itself a meditation, a steady heartbeat that marked the passing of time in rhythm with the waves below. As he reached the top, he noticed something new. Within the glass of the lantern, a faint shimmer rippled across the flame, not the usual gentle flicker of oil and wick, but something subtler, like sunlight dancing on a pool of water. Elias tilted his head, peering closely. He could almost see shapes within the glow, tiny silhouettes of ships that had long since passed, ghostly figures of sailors waving in greeting, and children laughing on distant shores. The lantern's light seemed to gather memories from far and near, stitching them together into an unspoken story. Elias hummed softly to himself, a tune he could not quite place, though it seemed older than anything he remembered learning. The lantern responded, casting golden trails that traced invisible paths across the walls of the tower. He felt a deep connection to the pulse of the world outside, the rhythm of tides, the slow rise and fall of clouds, the endless turning of day into night. And he understood, with a calm certainty, that he was part of this pulse, and the pulse of the world was part of him. He thought of all the nights he had spent in solitude, when the lantern had been his only companion. At first, he had felt lonely, as if the cliffs themselves pressed inward with invisible hands. But over time, he had realized that the loneliness was not empty. It was a quiet space, a canvas on which the world painted its smallest, most delicate wonders. Each night, the lantern hummed, the waves sighed, and the wind whispered, revealing glimpses of beauty that were otherwise unnoticed. Tonight, a foghorn sounded from the distant harbor, low and resonant, rolling across the water like a soft bell. Elias smiled. It was a reminder that others shared this world, that even in isolation, he was never truly alone. The lighthouse and its lantern were bridges, not just for the ships that sailed past the cliffs, but for hearts and memories, threading connection through distance and time. He leaned against the railing and let the flame's warmth seep into him. In that moment, he felt a gentle tug, as if the lantern were urging him to remember something he had long forgotten. His mind wandered back to his first winter at the lighthouse, when the storm had raged for days and he had feared the waves might swallow the cliffs entirely. He had lit the lantern through rain and wind, trembling but steadfast, and that night he had dreamed of the sea as a living entity, playful and watchful, guiding him through fear with quiet encouragement. He closed his eyes, letting the memory wash over him like a wave lapping against smooth stones. The lantern's flame flickered in sympathy, casting golden ribbons that danced across the walls. And as he leaned into the light, he felt sleep approach softly, like a tide rising with gentle insistence, carrying him toward dreams where past, present, and the quiet magic of the sea intertwined. He drifted, cradled in the lantern's glow, and for a long while, the world outside seemed to vanish. There were no storms, no lonely nights, no distant, unknown travelers, All that existed was the warmth of light, the rhythm of the waves, and the soft and endless hum of memory and hope that lived within the lighthouse itself. Night had settled with a tender hush, draping the cliffs and the lighthouse in a soft blanket of silver mist. Elias moved quietly through the tower, tending the lantern with the careful attention of someone performing a ritual older than memory. The flame flickered and swayed as if alive, and he could almost hear it whispering, not words, but feelings, longing, comfort, and an endless patience. He stepped to the window, gazing down at the waves that glimmered like liquid stars under the moon. And then he saw them, tiny lights dancing just above the water, pale and flickering, like fireflies hovering in a gentle breeze. At first, he thought it was a trick of the mist, the lantern reflecting in the fog. But as he watched, the lights moved with deliberate grace, circling and weaving patterns that made his chest swell with quiet wonder. Elias smiled, feeling no fear, only a soft recognition. He had always known the sea held secrets, small, delicate magic that only the patient could see. Slowly, he realized the lights were drawn to the lantern, as if it had called them with its warmth. Each one twinkled in response, as though acknowledging a friend long lost and now found again. The wind carried a gentle melody, faint but unmistakable, harmonizing with the lantern's quiet hum. It was the kind of song that did not belong to any instrument or voice, but to the very air, the waves, and the mist. Elias closed his eyes, letting the music fill him, tracing its golden threads through every corner of his memory. He remembered childhood summers by the shore, evenings spent listening to the hush of the tide, and the nights he had spent alone in the lighthouse, discovering the deep, patient magic of being still. Tonight, that magic felt almost tangible. As he leaned closer to the lantern, he could see within its flame the shapes of creatures he had never seen on land. Tiny glowing fish darting through the air as if it were water, delicate birds with feathers that shimmered like mother of pearl, and even the faint outline of a whale, immense and gentle, swimming through the misty expanse. All were drawn toward the light, drawn by something that had existed for far longer than he had. Elias's heart swelled with a quiet joy. He realized that the lantern was more than a beacon for ships. It was a gathering place for the forgotten wonders of the world, a bridge between reality and the subtle, hidden magic of the sea. And in that moment, he understood that his solitude had never been loneliness. It had been preparation. All these years, tending the flame, watching the tides, listening to the wind, he had been readying himself to witness this quiet miracle. He hummed softly, a tune that matched the rhythm of the lights, and for a long while he stood there, letting the magic surround him. The mist curled around the cliff, the waves whispered, and the lantern glowed steadily, cradling him in warmth and wonder. Outside, the little lights wove intricate dances across the night, telling stories in patterns only Elias could understand. And then, as though sensing his need for rest, the lights began to fade, one by one, retreating into the depths of the mist. The lantern's flame continued to burn, calm and unwavering, a steadfast heartbeat against the darkness. Elias felt sleep's gentle pull, and he allowed himself to be carried to dreams where the sea and sky were one, where the magic of the lighthouse stretched endlessly, and where the quiet wonders of the night could cradle him in peace. He drifted into that soft dreamland with a smile, knowing that even when the lights vanished, even when the mist swallowed the shapes and colors, the lantern's magic remained, a quiet promise that the world, though vast and mysterious, was full of gentle marvels waiting to be discovered by patient eyes and open hearts. The next night, the mist lay heavier than ever, curling over the cliffs like a pale, silken blanket. The air smelled of brine and rain, and the lighthouse seemed to breathe with Elias, its steady heartbeat echoing in the quiet. He climbed the spiral staircase with measured steps, lantern in hand, feeling the familiar creak of the wood beneath him, each sound a comforting note in the nocturnal symphony of sea and wind. Reaching the top, he set the lantern down and peered out across the darkened waves. Tonight, the air was alive with a peculiar energy. Tiny points of light shimmered far across the water, more numerous than ever, as though the sea itself had decided to pay him a visit. They moved with a gentle purpose, swaying and spiraling in patterns that made the heart swell and the mind quiet in awe. Elias rested his hands on the brass railing and watched. He realized that each light carried a fragment of memory, a story, or a wish, some from sailors long gone, others from children who had gazed at the cliffs in wonder, and yet more from creatures of the sea whose presence was rarely acknowledged. The lantern's flame seemed to respond to them, flickering in intricate patterns, reaching out to meet each one. And then, just as his heart began to hum in harmony with the scene before him, Elias noticed a faint figure appearing in the mist. A small child laughing, with eyes bright like morning stars. He blinked, uncertain if he was imagining it, but the figure approached, walking across the water as if it were sand. The child did not speak, but Elias felt an unmistakable warmth, a gentle acknowledgement, as though the lantern had summoned this vision to remind him of the pure joy he had carried in his heart all these years. Slowly, more figures emerged. An elderly fisherman, smiling with eyes crinkled by years at sea. A mother waving to a child on the shore. A small dog bounding happily along the cliffside. Each appeared for only a moment, yet in that moment Elias felt the profound truth of the lantern. It was a keeper of connection, a guardian of memory, a vessel through which the quiet magic of life could reach across time and space. He bent closer to the flame, humming the melody that had become his nightly companion. The light responded, weaving intricate golden threads into the mist, knitting together past and present, reality and dream. The figures danced among the threads, their laughter and whispers blending into the gentle hum of the lantern, and Elias, standing at the heart of it all, felt a deep, unshakable peace. The waves below shimmered with reflected light, tiny diamonds rippling with each gentle surge. The wind carried the soft scent of sea flowers, delicate and impossible, and the mist clung lovingly to the tower as if protecting its keeper. Elias leaned against the railing, allowing himself to be wrapped in the warmth of the moment, in the gentle pulse of magic that flowed through the lantern, the lighthouse, and the sea itself. And as sleep crept near, the figures faded slowly, returning to memory, to dream, to the depths of the mist, leaving behind only a soft glow and the steady hum of the lantern. Elias smiled, his eyes half closed, feeling the quiet joy of having been witness to something rare and beautiful, a connection across worlds, a harmony of light, memory, and life itself. That night, the lighthouse shone brighter than ever, the lantern's flame reaching far across the waves, not just guiding sailors, but warming hearts, cradling dreams, and reminding the world that even in the loneliest places, light, steady, gentle, and true, would always find its way.
The dawn arrived slowly, stretching its pale fingers across the horizon like a soft sigh. Mist lingered around the cliffs, curling and drifting in gentle swirls, blurring the line between sea and sky. Elias stirred on his bench near the lantern,
its brass warm beneath his hand, the flame still glowing faintly after the night's quiet magic. He rose slowly, savoring the stillness. The events of the previous night, the dancing lights, the figures from memory and dream, felt as though they were both distant and yet intimately present, stitched into the fabric of the lighthouse itself. He smiled, knowing that the magic had not ended, only rested, ready to return when the night and the mist called it forth once more. He polished the lantern carefully, each stroke meditative, each movement a small ceremony. Outside, the waves lapped gently at the rocks, carrying with them the faint hum of the sea's own music. The cliffs seemed to breathe in harmony with him, the wind sighing through the stones as if in quiet agreement. The world was calm, the light was steady, and all was well. He looked out across the water and saw a lone boat gliding toward the harbor, guided by the faint glow of the lighthouse. He imagined the people aboard, unaware of the magic they were passing through, yet touched by the steady beacon that promised safety, hope, and return. A warmth filled Elias's chest, not from pride, but from a deep, serene understanding. This light, this humble lantern, had always been more than a tool. It was a bridge, a reminder that even the smallest flicker could reach far beyond itself. Sitting back on the bench, Elias let his eyes wander over the cliffs, the village below, and the endless sea. Memories of laughter, of quiet nights, of the gentle hum of the lantern filled him with a soft, untroubled joy. He thought of the years he had spent here, tending the light, listening to the wind, and feeling the pull of tides and time. And he realized that every night, every solitary hour, had been a thread in the tapestry of the world, a tapestry woven of care, patience, and quiet magic. The lantern's flame danced lightly, reflecting the morning light, and Elias felt its warmth cradle him as he leaned back. Sleep called gently, a friend more welcome than any visitor, and he allowed himself to drift, wrapped in the lingering glow of the night's wonders. In his dreams, the sea sang its lullabies, the mist painted gentle patterns in the sky, and the figures from memory and imagination moved freely, guided by the soft, enduring light of the lantern. Hours passed, or perhaps only moments. Time itself seemed to bend in the presence of such gentle magic. And when Elias woke again, the world was unchanged, yet infinitely more beautiful. The waves continued their eternal rhythm, the lighthouse stood steadfast on the cliff, and the lantern burned, small but unwavering, a testament to the quiet, enduring power of hope and care. And so the days continued, each night a promise, each flame a quiet guardian. The lighthouse keeper, the lantern, the sea, and the mist existed together in a slow, patient harmony, a world alive with small wonders and infinite tenderness. And somewhere in that endless rhythm, Elias slept, dreamed, and woke, forever part of the magic that glimmered quietly, persistently, like the soft heartbeat of the world itself. The lantern's light, steadfast and true, shone on.